checking me out.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. We are going live at 7 a.m. every Wednesday with the Sauce Podcast with AJ Reygadas. Thank you for tuning in and joining me today. Make sure you stay tuned. Make sure you like, comment, and hit the subscribe button on the YouTube channel, the Sauce Podcast. But we're coming at you live this morning. I'm really excited here at the Line Studios with S180 Productions. I got an amazing guest that I've known for a while. He goes to the same CrossFit gym that I go to, and we started chatting about probably a little over a month ago about today. To plan this out, I wanted to bring him on to have him share his story, and then also have him talk about some of the amazing work that he's doing for the community, and just give an opportunity for you to talk and let everyone know what it is that you're doing to help others. And man, when you shared with me everything that you have, like, it's just, even right now and this morning as we've been talking, I'm just like, wow, like you got some amazing stuff, man. So Thanks. Everybody, I want to welcome Jason Turner, my guest, and have him speak and just share we're going to share some crazy stats with you, but at the same time, I felt that this segment was important because we're talking on something today that tends to make a lot of people feel uncomfortable. It also tends to scare people on being open to talking about things like this. But for the month of September, it is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, and I figured let's cap this month off with talking on this topic and come from a place of vulnerability while at the same time maybe inspiring others. And so, Jason, thank you for joining me this morning, bro. But yeah, let's start off with, I want to give the audience some insight on who you are and see if we can open up and share your story, man.
Such a deep question.
It's complex.
Well, this morning I'm grateful to be here. I appreciate you asking me to come on. And, we're talking how we've known each other for a while, but there's like different levels and layers to getting to know somebody. And just in the 15 minutes we've been here this morning, I feel like I know you on a much deeper level.
I agree, man.
And I think it has to do with the quality of communication and conversation, because sure. Passing in the gym, hey, what's up, that kind of stuff. And then this morning we started talking about situations that we both can relate to, and the vulnerability around like who I am as a person, and my life has been sort of dictated for the last 19 years by being in recovery from alcoholism, right? So I suffered from substance use disorder at a young age, was in the military for a long time, and then that process and that relationship to alcohol ruined that military career. I was fortunate, I was able to get out with an honorable discharge, and I was able to kind of transition into the work that I do now, which is I learned how to work in the field and become a therapist, working with people with mental health. And so, that process, it shapes my worldview, like how I see myself, how I see the world, how I see other people, and coming from a place of understanding around what drives people and sort of what makes people do the things that they do. And I've had that. The last 19 years I've been looking at why do I do what I do? You know what I mean? And when we talked about Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month, and you and I talked a month ago at the gym, part of my story is I've had suicide ideation for most of my life, and there's people in my life who are close to me that wouldn't know that. You know what I mean? There's other people in my recovery circle who, because it seems to be more prevalent with people who suffer with substance use, they're aware of that situation. But we were talking earlier about trauma, and it seems to me that my main response to trauma in most people is I gotta lock it away. And I gotta keep it.
Which I've been guilty of.
And I want to do everything in my power to avoid it. Just move on, work harder, make more money, become a better person, move here, do this. And those are all great things, but they don't actually address what's going on. And what I discovered for myself is that, I always say the rent's due, you know what I mean? I couldn't outrun it, and so recently, about 7 years ago was my most scary, I think, suicide ideation kind of transferred into I'm going to take some action. I was in a small town in Arizona. It was long before I moved to Texas, and I had a kind of a plan I was going to run to Alaska. I had a flight and was going to walk out in the woods and I was going to move there, wait about a month, and then.
So you were already planning this out.
Yeah. I had gone from it was always this well, I can always take my life. Like
Yeah.
it was sort of like, no matter how bad things get, there's always that option. And it formed like an opportunity for me to get some relief. Like it was like as sick as it sounds but the more people I talked to, and that's the crazy part, I started talking to people vulnerably about my stuff, and you think for so long I felt like I was alone.
Yeah.
I'm the only one that thinks this way. And then you'll say something to somebody and they'll go, dude, I think that like,
Yeah.
that's like, I've had those same thoughts. Not everybody, but there's quite a few people who are running around the planet with that.
And now you've made them feel comfortable and open enough to talk about it because they're like, oh, well, he's talking about it. So this makes me feel comfortable talking about it. So I get that.
And it's like, we're all running around holding on to stuff because we feel like it's not appropriate to say, or we'll get judged, or we won't be accepted. And we're like trying to keep it all, held inside. And the reality is we just all really need to kind of process it and talk about it.
Yeah.
And so what happened was I was on my way to the airport, and a friend called late at night, and he said the most random thing that he could have said to me. And I don't have a religious background, but I have a spiritual process, and like I don't have any negativity towards it. I'm open.
Yeah.
Like if you were, hey, let's go to church this week, I'll go with you.
Yeah.
Like it's not something that I like follow.
Yeah.
Like I'm open to it. And I was about 10 o'clock at night, and I was on my way to the airport to fly to Alaska, and a friend said, hey, I was thinking about you, and Jesus told me to call you.
Wow.
I am literally driving to the airport to go to Alaska to buy myself 30 days because I was going to walk out in the woods and kill myself.
Yeah. Wow.
And, so it caught my attention.
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean? And so he said, and what he offered me was an opportunity to make a difference. And I think why I got to the place that I got to, I was in a small town in my industry of mental health, and I saw a lot of people being taken advantage of. And I started to question big things in life, like, what's my purpose?
Yeah.
Why am I doing this? Doesn't matter. Like I started to have those, like, it just got a snowball effect of like, nothing I do matters. It's always, it's this dark, it's always going to be this way. And I was also, not able to effectively connect with other people because of my own trauma. And I didn't know that,
Yeah.
And so he gave me a reprieve temporarily, and I took him up on his offer, and he said, hey, I want you to run this program for me. And I felt like, oh, now I can actually make some changes. And so, and he said, well, why don't you just talk to whatever higher power you have? And he didn't know what I was doing. I didn't tell him, like, I'm on my way to the airport. He said, but why don't you let me know tomorrow? And so I was like, okay.
So he kept you alive another day.
I turned around and went back home. Literally didn't get on the plane,
Yeah.
And then, so that turned into a process of like reclaiming myself, getting back on track, and like ran a good program for a couple of years, made a huge difference in my life, and I think in a lot of people's lives. And then took an opportunity to move to Texas. So that's how I ended up here. Yeah.
Nice.
It's pretty wild. And I think about that, like what's the grace, right? Like I think about what allows me to be here today, and what allows me to even say who I am is like higher power, God, whatever you want to call it, whatever you identify with, but universal divine intervention support.
Yeah.
Like, what are the chances that at that moment I would have got a call and then been able to hear it?
It's so crazy you say this, man, because I remember it was about 3 years ago. One of my closest friends, closest childhood friends that I'm still close to this day. He was going through a divorce and fell into a deep, deep depression. And man, like I could not like do anything in my power to help shake it off. Like I was making sure he was going to church with me, and he's the one that led me to church, and so I clinged on to that. And then when he was going through what he was going through, it was like I was staying on him, but I started noticing he started distancing himself. He started, like removing himself from the situation of being like hanging out. Like he didn't want to leave his place. He wanted to just be alone. And he was just in this deep, dark depression. And I'll never forget this one day that I was always inviting him out, and he's just like, I'll let you know, or yeah, I'll go, I'll meet you there. And he wouldn't show up, and this one day I remember I was like, hey bro, I'm going to meet up with another childhood friend. I was like, I'm going to meet up with so-and-so. Why don't you come out and meet with us? He was like, no, I'm good. I was like, come on, man. Like, she's bringing a couple of friends. Like, let's just all go meet at this food truck place, and we're all just going to hang out and catch up. It's been years since we've talked to them. And he was like, no. And I was literally like, something was telling me like, get your ass up and come join me, right? Like, this is going to be fun. Like, not knowing what was going on with him personally in that moment. But dude, like, to this day, so he ended up going, and he ended up meeting our friend's cousin, which now till this day they're dating. They're in a relationship, and I'll never forget. He told me, he goes, bro, he's like, that day that you called me, I was going to take my life. Wow. And he was like, and you called me coincidentally, and you were just like practically begging, like, get your ass up, come join me, like, come on. Yeah. I didn't know, I mean, I knew he was in a depression state, in mental state, but I didn't know like what he was planning it all out in his head. He had a plan. Yeah. And that's the scary part, is when you hear that, because it's like a lot of people, in my opinion, that end up committing suicide, a lot of them plan it, man. Like, it's a planned thing. It's a thought process, and they draw it out. They pick a date, they pick a location, kind of like what you did. Yeah. And yeah, man, that's scary when that happens, because now they're visualizing, and it's like you're speaking it to an existence. And so, yeah, man, blew my mind. And I love that, there's still a couple until this day, and they're doing great. Yeah, that's insane. But it's just like, man, like, I would have never known, so yeah. And even just, I'll tell you right now, I remember when I was in a really dark place myself at the age of 20, I had lost my stepfather, was living in a lot of regret, and I was just in a really dark place, was in a relationship where I got cheated on, and felt like, man, like, I didn't know who to trust, and I just felt all alone. And I remember in that moment when I found out that I was being cheated on, that was my attempt. I attempted suicide, and I tried taking a whole bottle of I can't remember if it was Vicodin or Volume. Oh, wow. And I took it all. I chugged it all. And if it wasn't for my best friend till this day, man, like Brian, that him and my other roommates, I had a 3-bedroom apartment at the time, they broke down my door to my room. Wow. And one of my roommates, like, literally, like, held my hands behind my back, and my best friend Brian was just literally shoving his hand down my throat. And I remember in the moment, like, I was just not in a panic, but just in a, like, I'm ready to go, And I remember he was screaming at me and crying. He's like, why the hell are you doing this to yourself? This is stupid. And like, he was like, she's not worth it. And just all this stuff, man. And if it wasn't for him, man, shoving his hand down my throat to get me to throw up everything that I swallowed, like, that's yeah, insane. Dude. And so, but I was in that brink moment where I was just like, I was ready. I was ready to go, And thank God, since then, I've never had a suicidal thought, that was just, I was in a really dark place at a young age. And, but since then too, like, I've noticed when I talk about it with others, like, it creates a vulnerability where it allows others to open up to me too. And I do feel like that is another way of God doing his work, where now I get to talk about it, and now I get to help others. And I don't feel, I don't feel shameful. I don't feel embarrassed. I don't feel nervous or worried about being judged. Like, at the end of the day, man, like, we are who we are. And I feel like at some point, I mean, looking at some of these stats, I feel like at some point someone's faced suicidal thoughts, and so even then, like, I feel like it's important to talk about. We got to destigmatize it, because a lot of times people are looking for help, or they're asking for help. They might not be saying it out loud, but in other ways. Mm-hmm. And now I've been more, I should say, vigilant on looking for clues or for signs in someone where I feel like they're having, a mental breakdown or suicidal thoughts. Yeah. And so I think it's important, man. I think it's really important.
Just like simple stuff. Like, you see somebody who looks sad and saying, hey, like, asking them how they're doing. I think a lot of times there's, and there's a lot that can be done, right? We have hotlines and like support and therapy and opportunities for people who are struggling. But people say, well, what should we do? Like, what's the answer? And I don't know that there isn't just one answer, but what you just mentioned, and like, people wanting to be heard, people wanting to feel safe. And I think the best thing that I can do to like be a effective member of my community, if I want to like improve mental health, is try to be kind, right? Yeah. And then really try to see people and reach my hand out when I see someone struggling, or say, hey, are you okay? Or, and you never know, right? Yeah. You just never know like what that act of kindness is going to do. And I've had that experience myself where people have, maybe I wasn't as dramatic as like I was going to take my life, but like really, really sad, really not feeling it. And then someone just reaches out or notices, and it just changes your whole outlook. Yeah. It's like, oh, I'm seen, I'm heard,
It's true, man. And, I, even till this day, like, when I do the seminars that I do in the real estate industry, I always talk about, man, like, when I'm doing them, I feel so good in the moment. Like, I feel great. Like, I feel like I feel like I've found my purpose, and I'm pouring into others, helping others. And I'm just in a really good vibe, right? Especially with the feedback that I get afterwards. But I always notice that every time I do a seminar and I'm in that zone for an hour to 3 hours, depending on how long it is, later on that day or in the evening, going into the evening, I fall into this like energy dump, and it never fails. It happens every single time where I wouldn't say I get depressed, but I get very just like, I don't know, man. It's weird. I fall into a funk.
Yeah.
And so now I prep for it, right? Whenever I do these classes, I prep for it, but, and I just keep my mind busy, like the last time I did a seminar, I already had a planned day afterwards where like I drove up to Houston and went to a soccer game by myself, and so, just keeping my mind busy. But yeah, man, it's weird. I still haven't figured that part out yet, is understanding why I get like that afterwards. Cause I'm in this moment and having a great time and just talking about what I love and my passion and seeing the reactions and, the positive feedback. And then later on, hours later, I'm just like I just fall into a funk. Yeah. It's weird.
I would imagine. And so some of the stuff that I focus on in my mental health work is the physiology. So the neurochemistry, right? And I think, and I don't know that this is the answer, but it might be something for you to consider. Like, dopamine gets sort of has a reputation of like the pleasure molecule, but really it's about drive and motivation. And so what happens is when we are doing what we love, and we are fulfilling our purpose, or we are excited, that's a huge rush of dopamine. Like, it's a great experience. But when that is over, there's a depletion of dopamine in the brain, and it takes a couple of days to restore, right? So where you're like feeling like you don't, and it usually will manifest, since you're not saying it's like depression, it usually will look like low drive, don't feel like really doing much of anything, kind of like blah. And if you're normally like up and energetic, that can be kind of discerning. But it's also like, I think it's just part of the neurochemistry of like you're doing what you love to do, and you get really excited by that, and so you get this like dopamine hit or rush. And there's also like, and we don't have to go down this rabbit hole today, but like the way dopamine works is there's behaviors before too. So you could be, if you were like working out, if you were drinking excessive caffeine and you were doing like, chocolate will raise dopamine levels. There's a lot of things that we do on a day-to-day basis that affects our neurochemistry. And then you go do a seminar, you've basically like given yourself this like huge dump of dopamine. And so
that makes sense
when it's gone. So it might be something to consider.
Interesting. Yeah. So, man, before we jump into some stats that I want to share, let's talk about what you're doing right now, man. Cause, like I said, one of the first times that I actually met you, I remember that you, I think it was a Saturday morning or something like that you had this guest group of people that came in. And I swore you had told me like these were people that were either currently at the present time or previously battling with some form of addiction that you had created, or you're part of an organization that helps these type of people with finding an outlet through fitness. And so I wanted you to share and talk about that.
Well, we were talking before the show too, a little bit like, so about right after that planned trip to Alaska, I had really kind of stumbled into CrossFit and had an experience where I was much larger. I was powerlifting, and part of the reason why alcohol works so well for me is that the language that I use to talk to myself, that inner critic, the negative self-talk, and the way that I feel about myself, it disappeared. Like that's why I don't drink alcohol the way that I drank it, because I like the taste. Like I drank it because of the way that it allowed me to feel, and it changed my existence. Like it revolutionized how I felt. And so I went to this CrossFit gym, and I had this experience where I'm like literally dying inside, like tearing myself to shreds, because I'm 285, 290 pounds, and I can pick up a lot of heavy weight, but like I'm running 400 meters and I can't do it. Right. So I'm like, the language of you're fat, you're this, you're that. And this older gentleman who was much older than me, aligned his shoulder to me and said, "Hey, I got you, dude." And I remember in that moment, I wasn't comfortable enough to like shed a tear with him, but like inside I had, like, I was just like, wow, like it had such a profound impact on me. And I was like, this is what my clients need. This is what, because I am aware of, and I'm not saying that people outside the substance use realm don't suffer this way, but like, it's common. I have yet to meet a person who suffers from addiction that doesn't have a negative self-image, low self-esteem, and has a way of talking to themselves that is absolutely horrible. They would not talk to anyone in their life that way. But they talk to themselves that way, right? So, so that started me on a journey of like, I just had this intuitive thought, like, okay, this is what, I didn't know anything about neurochemistry at this point. I don't know anything about how effective physical movement is for the brain and the body and mental health. And all I thought was people need to come together in community. Like this would be a really good opportunity.
Yeah.
And so I went to a gym locally and I met some people and they were supportive. And I said, hey, would you be willing to let me bring some people into this space and do these groups? And so we kind of negotiated, that for a little while. And there was some hesitation and fear on their part, right? Because of some stigma and some negative stuff had happened in the community. And this group of people at this particular gym were amazing. Like they're amazing human beings, but there was still that stigma and that kind of battle. Yeah. We started the process and, everyone that was local in the area was like, you're not going to get people to do this. Like addicts don't want to do that. And what I had known is the effect of getting your heart rate up and working really hard. Like there's a euphoric effect, right? Yeah. And I just knew that it was going to work. And so it got real popular. Like people were really, the local clients were having a really good time with it. And then that led into it started as like a workout group. And then that led to me finding out some more about the neuroscience and like real applications for mental health treatment. And then I, sort of progressed into designing group therapy around this process, right? So instead of the traditional, and traditional therapy has its place and it's effective in the work that I do, we still use it. But the experiential process to me seems to be so much more powerful, especially with the movement piece, because we're optimizing brain chemistry, right? So we've basically taken a person who uses whatever coping skill, but let's just say it's alcohol. So I drink, and why am I drinking and why do I use chemical process? Because my brain chemistry is altered and I feel anxious or uncomfortable. Right? So when you take that away from me, how am I going to feel? I'm going to feel very uncomfortable. My system, the nervous system and my brain chemistry is so off.
It's looking for something.
I can't even focus, right? And so then what you asked me to do is to sit in a chair. And you and I can do this because we've been practicing for a while, and you asked me to share vulnerably. The whole reason I use and the whole reason I do what I do is because I'm uncomfortable. And now you're asking me to get even more uncomfortable. And a lot of times what happens, especially in the substance use area of treatment, is that the behaviors that qualify people, like they qualify me for treatment. I can't pay attention. I have outbursts. I'm like, they're the same behaviors that get people in trouble. So it's like, okay, I have to sit in this chair and act a certain way, but I'm not acting that way. So now I'm getting asked to leave group. And it's like, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense to me. And so what we did is what I did, and I worked with some people, is we created a process where we move first and we use psychological principles and evidence-based therapies in the actual workout. So if you imagine going to CrossFit, like if you went to Fit Stop, you would be in my facility, you would come into a CrossFit group, but all the exercises would be based on things like cognitive behavior therapy and looking at your thought process and breaking down when you start to think negatively about yourself, what are the thoughts that go with that? And then what actions can we take, right? So like I look at a box jump and I'm like, oh, I can't do that. And what's the first thought? Oh, I'm going to get hurt. There's no way. And then so we start to work in that space with that movement, and we may have to go down several heights to get you to feel comfortable, but we're working with the nervous system. And so that group process has kind of really been formalized. I got it manualized a few years ago and getting ready to open up my own program where I've been usually doing it for other people. And that's just, it was a great opportunity to sort of hone my skills and practice, but nobody's ever going to allow you to do it the way that you would do it for yourself. And I think, and part of my story is the reason I suffer from my relationship with alcohol the way that I do, and the reason it was so popular or so powerful in my life is that, the negative self-talk, I'm well aware I suffer from imposter syndrome big time. Like I've had this lifetime process of like feeling like I'm not good enough and I can't, and I have big dreams and big hopes and big ideas, but I would never act on them because it's like, well, that'll never happen for me. And I work with a lot of people who have that same.
I've dealt with, I've had those same talks in my head in the past. I agree.
And so recently I started to address those, and it's been pretty amazing, and we can talk about that too a little bit if you want. But so what I do right now, that group you're talking about, when I moved to Texas. I needed a CrossFit gym, and we reached out on a Facebook group, and Rudy and Elaine were like, yeah, come on over. And so, and when I met them, instantly it was like, oh, these are the right people for this. Because not every gym is going to accept that population.
Yeah.
And so it was really clear to me that they were amazing, and we were going to be a great fit. And so, they were super gracious and allowed me to bring that group in. And so we would bring the group in the morning and work them out and do some therapy, and then they would go back to the center. So it was like a local, and it's not a non-profit. It was a for-profit program.
Okay.
Yeah, insurance-based program that is a local here in town. So yeah, and those people that were in that group all identified as substance use disorder patients, and it's not always substance, not just substance use.
Yeah,
we have this thing called dual diagnosis, and they talk about, but the reality is I've never really met somebody who's like, I just suffer from using substances.
Yeah,
there's always going to be.
There's always some type of tie. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. For sure. And one thing that I've noticed with the groups that you've brought in is their workouts tend to be almost like a team type of workout. Like I've noticed they're working out together. It's not like, okay, guys, here's the workout. Y'all go do it individually. It's everything every time I've seen these people work out, they're working out as a group, as a team, as in like, I got your back, you got my back. And I've noticed that, and it's really cool to see how they interact with each other. Man, I sound really bad right now because I feel like I'm just like cornering them by themselves. But these people are some of the coolest people that you would never guess, is what I'm getting at. Like from the outside looking in, you would never guess that, because when I see them working out, and I talk to them too, like I'll chat with them and I'll encourage or whatever it may be, but like they're all in a good mood, and it's really cool. So you could tell, like, at least in that moment, for sure, it's working for them because they feel good, and who knows how they felt before they showed up, or, even that week, what happened for them. But in that moment, you see where they're actually enjoying it and they're getting value out of
Absolutely.
it. So that's really special, man. Let me ask you, I know we talked about, like, you've taken yourself off of social media to help with, like, just not become a distraction, or one of some distractions maybe. Have you also been very cautious with who you choose to surround yourself with, if you're able to identify? Because I'm willing to bet you have a way of easily identifying when someone may be going through something without even telling you, right? Because you can relate, right? But are you also cautious on who you choose to surround yourself with in that aspect?
Yeah, and I think, for me, the social media thing, and the truth is, for a long time in recovery, there was some things that I avoided. We talked earlier about trauma, right? And so there's this, like, don't want to go there. But it wasn't just a blatant disregard or denial that, like, not a denial, but like this thought process of, like, I don't want to address it. Like, I had done some work, and I was under the impression that I thought, like, oh, I've done the work. Like, it's okay. Life experiences happen. And I think for human beings in general, but I think especially for myself, for sure, in the population that I work with, human relationships seem to be the most triggering. I mean, we're social, right?
Yeah.
We have to have each other. We have to connect. Yeah. And isolation is actually really bad for our physiology and our mental health, right? And so romantic relationships, friendships, they are mirrors for ourselves if we're paying attention. Yeah. Unfortunately, for a lot of people, they're not mirrors. They're like, let me blame you. And so I had been in a relationship for about 3 years, and I left in January. It ended in January, where it was finally it was the relationship that said, okay, enough's enough.
Yeah.
Like, I'm 46 years old. I was 45 at the time. It's like, this is a pattern of behavior that keeps happening over and over, and I got to take a look at what's going on, because I can't just sit here and be like, it's all her fault. That's not reality.
Sure.
Like, maybe my emotions wanted to do that, and I did that initially, but when you take the black box of that relationship and you start to tear it apart, and you can look at yourself honestly, it's like, clearly I brought so many things to the table that affected this relationship.
Yeah.
Right? And so I decided I need to take a look at that stuff. And so when I tore open everything, it was like, I'm going to go full on. I'm going to experience all of this pain and grief and sadness. It was no social media. There was no like distractions, no women, no pornography, none of that stuff. It was, everything was off the table for a while. And it was like, I'm just going to sit in this thing called grief and sadness.
Yeah.
Right? And so what came out of that was, when I started to heal and get better, I would notice on social media, and I've known this because I work with people, but it's knowing it and doing something about it.
Yeah.
So I started to journal how I felt before I would look at social media, and I would journal after and it was always a negative. I always felt either I was comparing and contrasting.
Yeah.
And this is just for me. I think there's a lot of people who do this. I'm not here to say that social media is all bad, or I think it has its place and there's good and bad and everything, right? But like for me, there wasn't any value in it.
Yeah.
At the time, I was building this business. I'm about to open it. So like I didn't have any reason to be on social media other than to like look at people who are attractive and then, you know, distract myself.
Yeah.
So I would compare and contrast everyone's super highs and all their best stuff with like how I'm feeling internally, and I would feel less than, right? And then I would be less motivated, and I wouldn't want to work out, and I wouldn't, you know, and the best thing that I did for myself was to shut it down. I started showing up at the gym more in my free time. So I started to work out probably more than I needed to, but like it was a way for me to sort of deal with the stress and be productive. And I started to do a lot of real deep reflection. Like I started looking at my, you and I kind of touched on this earlier, but I started reading a book that was focused on reparenting and like inner child work and like healing and what I realized about my process is that the wounds of childhood, and it's not to say that my parents were bad, right? The wounds of my childhood have been affecting my life for the course of my life. And I finally said, enough is enough. I thought getting sober and helping people, I thought I was good. And the pandemic showed me, and that relationship showed me that like, dude, you got a lot of work to do. You know? And like, and it's not a bad thing, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that's what I say, like even just acknowledging it up front, like if you're able to self-acknowledge, like, I got to fix this. Like that's a big step. That's not just your first step. That's a big step because most people don't acknowledge it. Most people refuse to acknowledge it and take the easy route of, oh, it's not my fault. You know, it's that person's fault. And so that's even something I've been working on over the past couple of years too, is acknowledging my faults, acknowledging when I'm noticing a behavior shift for myself, right? And it never fails, man. Like whenever I notice a behavioral change in myself, you know, the closest people to me will notice it and be like, you haven't been going to church.
Yeah.
You know, and that's so the last time that I was having a behavioral shift. I remember calling my sister, and my sister was like, you haven't been going to church. I know that without you even telling me. And I was just like, no, I haven't been to church in 2 months, you know? And it's so true, man. Like just, it starts from, you know, finding that inner peace, but also like identifying, right? Identifying, okay, what's the root of this issue? Where is this coming from? And then now that I've identified it, it's okay, now let's work on it, right? Like what can I do to be better, right? I want to be a better version of myself. And that's why like I'm really thankful for this group, this men's group that I'm in right now, man, because I've been in men's groups in the past, but this one's very intentional where it's a group of like 8 men, and man, we're I think a month into this already, where we meet every Tuesday. And the first week, like we're all sitting there at the table and it's like, all right, guys, like what's your problem? You know, like what do you face? And I mean, we got guys in the group that, you know, battle with alcoholism, pornography, you know, different, all sorts of issues. And we were talking about this before we went live, you know, that you had asked me, do you find a common, you know, like a common, almost like we're all able to relate to where the core is coming from, even though they're different types of addictions. We're all finding a common ground of where this is being triggered from. And it's true. It's trauma from the past, from our childhood, where we can all relate to that. But so week 1 was very inspiring, very eye-opening, because when I talked about the things that I'm challenged with or battle with, you know, like now it gives that vulnerability to where we allow each other to give constructive criticism. So as I'm speaking and saying all these things, I got another man saying, hey, well, do you think that, you know, do you think that that's maybe because of this? And now we're getting different perspectives. And bro, like that alone is very eye-opening in itself, because I feel like we have this thought in our head of where we think this is coming from, and it's our way or it's our thought, you know? But now when you start hearing other perspectives, where you're like, damn, I never thought of it that way. Yeah. You know, it's so true. And so, man, it's just doing so much for us right now where it's really cool. You know, and I've talked about it in the past openly. The things that I struggle with is acceptance, you know, things that I try to find my value in helping others, and I try to define my level of value with helping others. And so those are the things that I battle with. And it falls back to my childhood, to abandonment issues with my dad being a deadbeat, you know? Yeah. And so it's things like that I'm now facing, and that I'm now working on, and that I'm now like saying like, I want to be better, you know, like I want to be better. And it was really cool, because even at the age of 21, when I was faced with dealing with addiction at that time, you know, that my son being born, I say it till this day, I tell him constantly, like, dude, you saved my life.
I remember we first had, it was like when I first got here, we were talking, and you had said that exactly.
Yeah, I told my son, I was like, bro, you saved my life when you were born, because thank God, I didn't have to go through a treatment center or anything like that. I literally woke up one day and was like, I'm about to be a father, and I don't want to be anything like my dad. You know, I don't want to be anything like my dad. He was a deadbeat. He's still a deadbeat, you know, and I don't hate him anymore. I did then. I had all this animosity and remorse and everything towards my dad, but now I'm at peace with things with him. But at the same time, that was enough motivation for me to clean myself up and say, fuck that. Like, I want to be a better dad than what my dad was to me. And yeah, man, he's been my big influence. And so it's crazy. And that's one thing that I've always been good about is, in a negative, what can I extract positivity out of that, right? Like, okay, this situation happened to me. What can I do to be better about it? Where's the positive? Where's the silver lining, you know?
How do I make this useful?
Exactly. How do I make this useful versus accepting being a victim, right? Accepting the pettiness for myself.
Or
being bitter about it, right? So that is something I've been really good at over the past several years. But yeah, man, that was enough motivation for me to say, I'm going to stop doing drugs, and I'm just going to focus on being a better dad, you know, or being a good dad. And yeah, man, it's just,
you can imagine like that feeling, but there's patients that I've worked with, clients that I've worked with, where that's not enough, you know?
Yeah.
So then coming back from that is really difficult for people, because so you have these wounds from childhood, and you have this negative self-image, and then you have been warped, but you've been literally recreated by the chemical process. Mm-hmm. So drug addiction has created an opportunity for you to become something that you would have never become.
Yeah.
And it looks like it's a personal choice. And the stigma is it's a choice. And the reality is it's not. And we just talked a little bit about the dopamine, right? And so that's about drive and motivation. Well, if you look at the chemical process and how there is nothing on the planet organically that will give you the amount of dopamine that like cocaine or alcohol or the standard drugs. And then if you get into like things like crystal meth, we're talking 10 times the normal amount. So if it's around drive and motivation, and I got something that gives me 10 times greater than anything on planet Earth, like the best sex, the best car, the best day ever, what am I going to pay attention to? I'm going to pay attention to that. So some people end up in a scenario where, and quite a few people, where the birth of a child isn't strong enough to change that. Yeah. And then what's going on internally is like, what's wrong with me? I'm a horrible person. And it's like, no, you're a sick person. You have a disorder in your brain.
Yeah.
And there are things that we can do to help you. You know what I mean? And I think it's great that you found that men's group. When you were talking, I thought it sounds a lot like, so I got my recovery through 12-step programs.
Yeah.
And so when I have a change in behavior, it's people will say, have you been to a meeting lately? Or have you talked to your mentor or your sponsor lately? And it's like, no, I haven't actually. You know?
Yeah.
So we have these things that kind of keep us on what we call the beam. And when we don't do them, it's clear to the people around us that like something's off. You know?
Yeah.
And it may take us a little bit to figure out what that is. You know?
For sure, man. You know, now it's just, I really enjoy helping other people, man. And I help, you know, I don't know if they're going to watch this or if they're watching right now, but there's been people I've reached out to on social media that have maybe been outwardly outspoken on their post or something about like, you can just tell they're having bad thoughts, where I've reached out to them through DM and I'm just like, hey bro, I'm here if you want to chat, like give me a call. Trust me, I can probably relate to what you might be thinking right now. Like I'm available, man. And it was, gosh, probably about 6 months ago, I saw this woman, I'm still friends with her on social media, but I saw this woman post something talking about just like, you know, what's worth it. Like she's posted something like what's I don't see any worth in living, right? And I was just like, whoa. And of course you see all these comments like, girl, like call me or something. And I remember DMing her and I was just like, hey, like I saw your post. I just wanted to see, I know we don't know each other, but I'm available if you just want to talk to somebody that you don't know that has an unbiased opinion. And I gave her my number, and sure enough, bro, she called me. We spent an hour on the phone.
That's amazing.
And I haven't talked to her since, but we spent an hour on the phone, and I let her talk. I let her talk first, right? Let her share, like get everything off her chest. And her situation was a relationship situation that she was dealing with, but I just started like talking to her and pouring into her and gave her almost like a how should I say, like a alternative way of thinking of things, and gave her my perspective and really got her to think, to where by the time we ended the phone call, man, like she was in a much better mental state, right? Like I felt confident getting off the phone with her that she was in a better place, because it was just giving her a different perspective on her thought in that moment, to where she was like, now that you say that, that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And if I felt good, dude, I felt good, because who knows? And maybe she was just speaking out loud and she was looking for help regardless. I felt good knowing, like, you know what, like, I don't even know this person.
Absolutely.
And I feel like I just maybe had an opportunity to pour into her, and it was really cool, man. But you know, I've looked for things like that on social media, which I've been very cautious about on social media. I don't follow anything negative, right? I don't follow any media outlets. I don't follow, if I see, I'll tell you right now, most of my time on social media is spent on unfollowing or unfriending people. Because if I see someone post something negative, I'm like, I don't need this shit on my timeline. So I'll either unfriend them or unfollow them. And that's why people are constantly reaching out to me, and they're like, dude, you're always so positive. I'm like, look at, you got to be careful on what triggers you, you know? And Absolutely. So I'm very cautious about that.
And I feel the same way. I did keep my messenger open, because there's people who know me that I always wanted someone to be able to reach out if they needed help, or like, and I do get that where it's like, hey, I need a treatment center, or I need, because they know that I work in the field. You said something, you had asked me the question earlier about people, and I don't think I answered it, like about choosing who I associate with.
Oh yeah.
And I think for a long time, I would have told you that I do pay attention to that, but the underlying mechanism of the trauma and the unresolved issues for me allowed me to keep attracting people that weren't good for me, and allowed me to keep falling into, it's like a trap.
Because it's almost like that, you are who you attract.
Yeah, and you think, and that there's that, and you also think that you're not doing that, but you are, and it's this repeated cycle, right? So this most recent work from January until now on like reparenting and inner child stuff, like I'm very cautious. Like it's one of the reasons why, and I don't, like my issue with social media isn't about, let me blame social media.
Sure.
My ability to be on social media and feel good is what I'm worried about.
Yeah.
My ability. So I look at different
people, triggers.
Yeah. And I look at people in my life, and I don't blame them. It's like, hey, if you happen to be somebody who is a victim quite a bit, and you are always sort of gossiping and toxic, I don't want that in my life today.
Same, bro.
And what's crazy though is I didn't value myself enough before to actually do anything about it.
Yeah.
And if I did feel like I wanted to do something about it, the need for acceptance was like a pull that kept me in places longer than I needed to be, right? So now I'm at a place where, and I used to go, when I would do it before, it would be like aggressive. It would be like, you know, F you, I don't.
Yeah.
And now it's just not that way. I don't have the emotional attachment to it. It's like, I see you for where you're at. I bless you on your journey, and like, it's just not for me. You know? If I'm not working with you and we're not going to actually change anything, like, what's the point? I got to be real careful, because my energy is precious, dude. And I'm starting to really take care of myself. I agree
100% with that, man. Because that's the thing, dude. Like, since I posted, we were talking earlier about how I posted my testimony on social media, and I talked about a lot of personal things that I felt I needed to come clean about, and in regards to my past. And I've had so many people since then, even till this day, that will reach out to me and open up to me about things that I don't personally know, right? But and I'm always wanting to help, right? And so one of the first things I look to identify, though, is, does this person just want to be heard? Do they just want to be a victim? Mm-hmm. Or do they actually want to be heard, but then actually get help to do something about it, right? Because I'm down to hear you out, and I'm down to pour in and see how I can maybe help. But if you just want to pity yourself, I got to protect myself, you know, because I also got to be, like you're saying, like I got to be cautious on who I surround myself with, because the reason why I stay positive, or the reason why I always come off positive, is because I surround myself with positivity. So if I'm going to bring you into that, you know, I need to know that you at least want to be better and want to fix that, and not just look for the blame all the time or point the blame all the time. Like, let's actually be proactive and do something about it. And so it sucks, man, because there are some people that have given me backlash for that. Like, oh, like you avoid me, or, oh, this, that, or how come I don't get invited when you go out, or something like that. And I'm like, you know, like it's like, because I got to protect myself. I got to protect, you know, if you don't want to be a better person, why should I bring you around me? You know, because I came from that, and yes, I'm here to help. I want to help any way I can. But if you don't want to help yourself, I can't be around that.
Yeah. And you can't always be the one pouring out either. That's something that, you know, and I will say this, when you were talking about helping others, like whenever I'm focused on me and mine, I'm having a horrible experience.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not, and that's a trap. Like I get caught up in that when I remember that, oh, being part of someone else's journey, helping other people, focusing on what their needs are. That's a really great place for me to be, and sort of like trying to make a difference. But there's a fine line, and I've seen it for myself, where like I did too much for too long, and it was like, it needs to be balanced with, I'm taking care of myself and I'm giving, where I just gave and didn't actually like, and part of that was the deficit or the trauma of like, I have to be this person in order for you to accept me. I have to be, if I'm not providing a service in your life, I'm not worthy. And it was like, the question that I had to ask myself this last year was like, am I worthy just as who I am? Like, just sitting in your chair today, or is it because I have to do something for you? And I decided that I was going to be somebody who was just inherently worthy, and I was going to participate in life. And that was a decision that I didn't even know I needed to make until this last year.
Yeah, dude. So there used to be a coach at our gym, Henry Gray at Fitstop, back in the day, dude. He's OG. And he actually left the gym, left his job to focus full time on working for his church. And he's now one of the lead pastors at his church. Really cool dude. I've actually known him since we were little kids. And so whenever I fall into this funk, I tend to reach out to him. And he's that person that I rely on, that I can reach out to. Yeah. And bro, it was about a month, almost 2 months ago. I fell in this funk, and I reached out to him. And what I loved, you know, like, was, dude, I called him, and he's like, let's meet tomorrow. Let's meet for coffee. Like, he was very like, let's address this right away. Right. And so we met, and I started just opening up to him about things. And I talked about, you know, like I tend to base my value, my self-worth based on how much I'm helping others. And it was really cool to get his perspective, because he was like, first off, like, God loves you for being that way, right? Like he loves that you're putting people first, and that's important. It's important to acknowledge. It's important to identify and understand. He was like, but that should not be how you gauge your level of self-worth. Don't define your value based on how much you're helping other people, because you're never going to find true happiness out of that. And I was just like, man, I never thought of it that way. But that was what I was doing, is I define my value on how much I'm able to help someone else. And even though it's geared towards the right mindset, it's not the right thing to do, because where's that line of, okay, now I'm happy? When is your cup going to be full? You know? And so him saying that to me made me realize, like, man, that's so true. This all these years, every time I help someone, it's like, oh, I feel good about myself. Yeah. And it shouldn't be that way.
Well, I think too, for some people, and myself, this is where it came from for me, is like, if I do enough, you won't leave.
Yeah.
If I do enough, I'm good enough, right? And
I never thought of that too. You know, yeah.
Like, and it's this real need for, and I think we as humans have this deep sense in knowing that, like, we need to be accepted. We need to, and it's part of survival. Like back in the day, if you weren't part of the herd, life was dangerous.
Yeah.
Right? So I've seen that for myself. I have to remind myself that I'm a human being, not a human doing. Yeah. And like that whole process of like just constantly providing some value to somebody's life. And it's like I also didn't have I wasn't comfortable allowing you to help me. Like and I got a lot of feedback in the relationship that this last relationship, and I denied it for a long time, and she was right. It's like you do not allow me in.
Is that also because, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but is that also because you feel like you're being inconvenient to that person?
I'm a burden. Right?
That was me, man.
And I also have whether it's accurate or not, right? And I'm still, the verdict's kind of out on this for me. I don't know yet, but like the verdict's not out. I mean, it's like, I think I do that too because I don't know if you're going to stay.
Yeah.
Like, will you, because I've never really fully accepted me for me.
Yeah.
So if I give you this thing, like the shadow side, the dark side, if I let you know what's going on in here, you're going to run out the front door.
Yeah.
You know? My history tells me that when I'm not providing and I'm not doing, I'm not part of I'm not part of the crew, right?
Yeah.
My family of origin kind of says that if I'm not showing up the way you expect me to show up, then I don't get the love and acceptance. Love is very conditional for me, right? And so that's been a huge fear of mine. Like if I really if you really knew what's going on in here.
I can relate, man.
And I found some people, like you talk about friendships, that guy that you talk to, like I have people in my life today who are literally, they know what the skeletons are. They know, you know, and they still accept me. And it's a very powerful healing process.
For sure. You know, that's something that to this day I battle with relationships is I don't want to be an inconvenience to someone. I don't want to feel like I owe someone something, but I also don't want to be an inconvenience. And so I've noticed this in the last relationship I was in. I remember this was a problem for our relationship is I would always give an exit strategy to my partner, right? In the meaning of like, hey, do you want to go to the movies tonight? And then before she could answer, it's like, but if not, it's okay. Like I totally get it if you're not available, like we can do another day. And she would get bothered by it because she would say, dude, like, why do you always do that? Like, just don't say that. Like, yes, we can go and yes, I'm available, but why do you always, and it's just like, I don't know. Like, I just don't want to be an inconvenience to somebody, And so it's something that I've always struggled with. And I mean, that's just me, man. Like, I never want to feel like I owe someone something, and that's something, whether that's pride or whatever it may be, it's just something that I've always battled with.
But here's the thing for a guy like you, right? And I'm not treating you like a client right now. But if I was to challenge you on that, I would say, well, so you just talked for a while and you totally glow and light up around what it's like to show up for other people.
Yeah.
So when you deny your partner that opportunity to show up for you, it's not being a burden. You're taking away an opportunity for them to feel good about themselves and to feel good about.
That's true, man. That's true.
And that's what I've had to recognize.
I was in a relationship where she would tell me like even with like my birthday coming up next week. Nice. Right, I already got people asking me, what do you want for your birthday? I'm like, I don't want anything. I really don't. Like, I don't want anything from anybody, because it's that burden feeling. It's that feeling of like, well, you don't have to do that for me. Not that I don't want it, not that I don't appreciate it, but I don't want you to go out of your way for me. Yeah. You don't need to do that. And so I was in a relationship at one point where her love language was gifts, right? And it wasn't mine, but it was gifts. And it was just like, I would feel very uncomfortable. It would make me feel uncomfortable. And I would tell her like, you do not have to buy me anything, like don't do that. Like, I appreciate it. Thank you. But please don't do that again. Or I was in another relationship.
But what you're really saying is you're making me uncomfortable.
Yeah. Like or another relationship where it was, her love language was, acts of service. So we, get in an argument. Sometimes I would come home and my house was clean and I'm like, why did you do that? Like, you didn't need to do that, And so it's things like that I've worked on over the years that have gotten better at because like you said, I also need to acknowledge and allow them to do what they want to do and let them feed their love language as well as mine, so.
Might be a great exercise for you to just tell your friends what you really want for your birthday.
No, right? All right, here's my list, guys. Here's my wish list. But it's funny, I will say that I do feel comfortable around my mom and my sister because every Christmas, it's hey, send me your wish list, and so I'm like, here you go. And there's a laundry list.
A link to the Amazon cart.
Yeah. It's a lot of cheap stuff, right? Like gift card to Burlington or something or Amazon or Bath and Body Works. But I'll send my list and I usually have the longest longest list out of everybody.
Yeah, that's because you don't let your friends buy it.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, man. So again, guys, the main message of this is always be vigilant and keep your eyes open when you notice that someone might be going through something. A lot of people actually know in the industry. A couple of years ago, 2020, man. So 2020 and 2021 were my most challenging years back to back. I think for everybody, 2020 was a challenging year. Yeah. But starting off on the wrong foot on January 1st, I had a team of agents that I carried for 8 years, and I had an agent that committed suicide. Wow. And I found her, and so it was on January 1st. Wow. And I think it really took a toll on me because I brought her onto the team knowing that she was battling with depression. She was going through a divorce. Husband left her for a younger woman. They were married for 15 plus years, and husband left her. And she was just in a really bad funk. And I purposely brought her on the team. She had asked me if she could join the team. I purposely brought her on the team to surround her with the other single moms that we had on the team, because I felt like, there's going to be a support here. And I brought her on, and I would work on, I would meet with her. I took her to church with me. It was a crazy situation because she was 49 years old. And I remember sitting with her, because I would sit and have these long drawn out conversations with her about what she was going through. And I remember telling her one time, will you come to church with me? And she's like, AJ, I'm not a Christian. And I was just like, okay, well, what are you? And she's like, I'm a Mormon. And I was like, I don't know anything about that, but my church doesn't care. You can come anyway. And sure enough, she came with me one day, man. And it was a really beautiful moment, because I felt like we were having a breakthrough, and I felt like we were working towards the right path. And ultimately it ended with her taking her life. And it was really challenging, man, because being the one to call her family, call her husband, call her mom, and be like, it's her, that was a challenge, man. That was something I never thought I would face as a team leader in real estate, And so now it's like, man, this is not how I anticipated to start off the year. But forget that selfishness thought. I just lost, someone just killed themselves. Absolutely. And took their life. And it was a very eye-opening experience. And I fell into a funk for 2 weeks. I remember on my way back home when I found her, and cops showed up, statements, everything. On my way back home, I called my son's mom, and I was like, because my son lives with me, and I was like, can you please pick him up and just take him? I was like, I just need to be by myself for a couple of days. And I remember I stayed in bed in my dark room for 2 days, and I didn't get out. I didn't answer anyone's call. I didn't talk to anybody. I just stayed in my room. And that was not a good way to start off the year. Yeah, even then I was sad and depressed for 2 weeks. And I think we waited a couple of weeks before we had our next team meeting. And even then, that first team meeting was a challenge, man, because it's 4 of us in here and we're all crying, we're crying because there's an empty seat, and man, that was tough. And then last year, with my close friend Daniel, who passed away, ultimately, being part of that decision of being responsible for turning off the machine, that was the hardest decision I've ever made in my life, and so dealing with that. And then 2 months after that, one of my other closest friends taking her life, and Daniel and this other person were the 2 people I relied on at night to chat with on a nightly basis, that I would conversate with every single night. So now in a 2 month span, both of them are gone. I was in a really dark place last year. That first quarter, that first quarter of 2021, which was also the time that I started the brokerage. And so it was a challenge, man. I remember questioning God one time throughout all of this. I questioned one time, why are you doing this to me? And I never questioned him after that, but I remember questioning, cause I was pitying myself. Yeah. And I thought, and I was just like, why are you doing this to me, bro? Why? I thought that was enough dealing with Daniel. Now I have my other close friend that I talk to every single day that now took her life. Why are you doing this to me? And I was in the process of selling her house, and it was a challenge, man. And all I kept saying to myself after that was, he wouldn't put anything in my path that he didn't think I can handle. Yeah. And honestly, man, I talk about it very openly now with a lot of my friends, that if it wasn't for me finding my faith 5 years ago, I don't know if I'd be alive right now, considering everything that I've gone through, you know? And so that's kept my head straight. That's kept my head. And yeah, I mean, again, we're human, man. We have our dips, we have our highs and lows. And those are things that I work on. And those are things that I acknowledge. And those are things that I want to be better at. And so that's why I've joined this men's group to work on that. But I think that that's really important for anybody, any guy, any woman, is to acknowledge your faults and acknowledge how you can work on being a better person. And then helping others, because that's where I don't want to say that's how you determine your value, but that's where you find a sense of not just gratitude, but also a sense of purpose, where it's like, dude, like now I'm able to help and pour into others, and talk about these challenges and these journeys and these seasons that I've gone through, where now I feel better talking about it. It's a form of therapy itself. I
also think too, like when you were just, that's a lot, and I appreciate you sharing that with me and all your listeners. The thing that comes to mind for me is the greatest thing I've ever done for myself, and it's happened most recently, and it happened when I got sober, was take responsibility. Right?
Yeah.
And so like and it doesn't mean that there's not legitimate victimization gets sort of a bad rap, but there's like legit victims, right? And and even in the legit areas of my life where I was a real victim, I still had to take responsibility. So like the trauma is not my fault, but the healing is my responsibility, right? So I have to accept that responsibility of like, I could sit and look at the cards that I've been dealt and say, this is a shitty hand and like, I don't want to play anymore, which unfortunately some people do. Or I can say, you know what, I'm going to try to play the best game I can with these cards and see what happens. And when I've done that and I've taken that viewpoint, it seems like things line up. Like I end up with the right people in my life. I end up with the right resources. It may not turn out exactly how I wanted, but in my experience, not getting my way is actually a good thing. Like I usually want for myself what I sell myself short. Like I end up with these other things. I'm looking at, I'm over here looking at, this is what I think I want. And really what I really want is like acceptance and love. And I find it over here. I've always it's been my experience since I've been on this path. And I think the idea of spirituality and faith, being able to make sense of an insane world, is like a really powerful tool for being, healing.
For sure. Guys, we're going to wrap this up. It's been a good one, man. We're going to have to run it back again, dude. Cool. But I just want to share some stats before we wrap it up. There's some crazy stats out there that I just want to make sure, given that it's Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, I want to bring these things to light. They're not the most exciting things to talk about by any means, but just bringing awareness and letting people know and understand that suicide is out there, and it's not looking good, so we got to make sure that we're putting it out there, and we're destigmatizing people being open to having those conversations, because I think it's very important. And so a couple of things I wanted to share is the annual age adjusted suicide rate is 13.42 per 100,000 individuals. Males die by suicide 3.5 times more often than females. 12% of the population deal with addiction. 24 million people in the U.S. You are dealing with some type of substance abuse. I think you shared that stat with me. A couple others. 1 in 5 U.S. adults experience mental illness each year. 1 in 20 U.S. adults experience serious mental illness each year. 1 in 6 U.S. youth aged 6 through 17 experience a mental health disorder each year. 50% of all lifetime mental illness begins by the age of 14. And I bet that age is going to continue to go down and start at an earlier age as accessibility to social media and everything it's going to continue to rise, man, because even my kids are on social media, and I'm not the biggest fan of that, but I got to be careful on my limited say. But yeah, 50% of all lifetime mental illness begins at the age of 14 and 75% by the age of 24. Suicide is the second leading cause of death amongst people between the ages of 10 through 34.
That's insane.
Man, that's crazy. So guys, please just be aware, and offer to help. And if you're someone going through something, please reach out to somebody, professional help, and just do something about it, because everyone's got a purpose on this planet, and it's very important that we acknowledge that, we understand that, and that we continue to surround ourselves with people that we can trust and rely on, to when we're going through those seasons, or we're going through those phases where maybe our mind's not in the right place. We have someone that we know we can trust, that we can rely on to get help. And so I just want to bring that to light and make sure, and let's work on destigmatizing this, because the last thing we ever want is to regret not being able to say bye to somebody, or creating another experience with someone. So guys, thank you for tuning in today. This was a little different than what we normally do. But I just think it was probably the most important one that we've done. So thank you for tuning in. Please share your feedback. Please go comment, subscribe to the YouTube channel, The Sauce Podcast with AJ Reygadas. Real quick, just a reminder, next Friday on the 7th, my birthday, I want to remind y'all that we got a big event going on at my office at First Choice Realty. We're doing a movie night. We're showing Hocus Pocus on the big screen. We're going to have food catered. We're going to have a trunk or treat for the kids, costume contest for the kids. We're also doing a haunted house for the kids. We have over 30 spots of vendors to fill, and I believe we're down to like 7 spots or something like that as of yesterday. But we want, if you own a business, if you run any type of business and you're looking to put your name out there, we would love for you to participate in our trunk or treat. We're looking to make this the biggest event that we've ever had at First Choice. And so we would love for you to bring the family, bring the kids, most importantly, bring the kids. This is a family friendly event. Bring the kids, but it's an open invite to everybody. I don't care if you're even another realtor in the industry with a different brokerage. Bring your broker. Y'all are welcome to join us too. So again, that's next Friday at First Choice Realty, 970 Isom Road, San Antonio, Texas, right by the airport. But again, everybody, thank you for tuning in today. I hope that this was able to not only shed some light on you, but also help you influence to make an impact in someone else's life. Because I always end with that on every episode, is go make an impact on someone's life. So again, bro, thank you for joining me today, man. And thank you guys. Have a blessed one, and go make an impact on someone's life.
Cool.